Afternoon and welcome to the NACE Connect virtual experience. Thank you for joining us for the Connect Kickoff. It's our pleasure to introduce NACE Executive Director Shawn VanDerziel. Shawn, take it away.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. It's great to have you here with us today for the kickoff of NACE Connect, our virtual experience. And as many of you know, we generally have a conference experience that is in the first week of June, and this year, unfortunately, we had to cancel that experience. And so we collectively put our heads together to figure out what to do in replacement of that, because we have so much content and so many important things that we know that folks want to share and learn about. So we put together NACE Connect, and we're hoping that it will turn out to be a great experience for you along the way. There are over 25 sessions for you to indulge in that are in 3 tracks. Those tracks are diversity, equity, and inclusion, workforce development, and career readiness. And we also have a track on virtual engagement of students and candidates. So hopefully some really timely topics, things that we're all going through, and be able to apply those learnings immediately. In addition to our tracks of content, we have over 20 free sessions that we hope that you will engage in as well. Those free sessions range from things like today and our featured speaker, Johnny Campbell, who you'll hear from in just a little bit. Next week, we have another featured speaker, Chelsea Williams from College Code, to talk to us about developing and retaining a diverse workforce. Award sessions. I hope you will take the time to indulge in these award sessions. They're almost every day at the end of the day. And it's an opportunity for you to learn from your peers who are putting into place best and promising practices. And we're going to talk to them one-on-one about the programs, products, and services that they're delivering in their environments, and hopefully have some translation to your environment as well. We have tech solution sessions we hope you'll enjoy. There are 9 of those from various vendors who will show you how individuals are applying technology into their environments as well. So I'm not going to go on and on. What I want to do is jump into our program. We're going to, I'm going to speak with Chris Carlson, who is the current president of NACE. Once Chris and I are done, we are going to have an introduction to our award winners of the Academy of Fellows. And we're going to bring Jen Lasater on, our new incoming president, and then we will feature our speaker, Johnny Campbell. So let's get started here. Hi, Chris, how are you?
Hi, Shawn, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm pretty good, thank you. Can't complain. The weather here in Pennsylvania is perfect today. And how about where you are?
Not too bad. It's kind of a little cooler than normal, which is good.
Okay, well, that's good. I should have let everybody know, while you're president of NACE this year, you have a day job, and your day job is as senior manager of university recruiting and relations, correct?
Correct.
Did I get that right? All right, awesome.
Close enough.
So, mostly? Okay. So we've had a pretty unprecedented year, Chris, during your presidency, and I can pretty confidently say it's probably been one of the most unusual presidencies of any NACE president in history. And I was hoping you might be able to tell our audience a little bit about what that has been like for you.
Well, there's a lot more gray hair, to say the least. You know, when I started last year in Orlando, I really talked about how we can take all the work we did from a future of we perspective and really apply it to leading practices and being able to adapt and flex and pivot to what was ahead of us. I didn't realize that what was ahead of us was not only an executive director who was planning on retirement and going through an entire search process to come to hiring you, Shawn. But also during that period, we turned the corner into 2020 during a global pandemic. And we as an association, we as individuals, we as professionals had to pivot and pivot quickly. And NACE responded very quickly with town halls, with really consolidating a lot of the best practices from across the organization. Your leadership, I think, Shawn, you were working on this before you even officially started at NACE. So it was wonderful to get your input and guidance and leadership through that process. And through that all, there's been an increase in advocacy related to that. There's also been a lot more exposure from a press perspective. So NACE really positioned itself to be a really strong leader in what has become our future. And then, of course, 2 weeks ago, we had the tragic incident in Minnesota with George Floyd. Which really was once again a wake-up call for all of us. And it's been really something to work through over the course of the last few weeks from a NACE perspective. The NACE organization, the NACE staff, our NACE members have pivoted once again to really put a spotlight on what we really need to focus on, which is eradicating systematic racism. We have a unique opportunity as an organization to really tackle that. Over the course of the year, we stood up the affinity groups, which have allowed us the opportunity to really engage the diversity of our membership. So my hope is that as we continue, we're not only going to say the right things, we're going to do the right things, and we're going to act on what we say we're going to act on. So there's a lot more to come, and it's been quite a emotional and exciting year.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's a good overview. So much has happened in that time. I'm wondering if you could talk with us a little bit about what some of the joys of serving in this capacity have been.
Well, the biggest joy of serving in a capacity at NACE is the volunteers. It's the membership, the members themselves. Everything from spending probably 2 to 3 weeks calling a multitude of people to serve on committees, to serve as co-leads or co-chairs, to learning more about what everyone has as far as their talents and their abilities that they can bring to the table. The biggest joy is also the staff at NACE. They were able to pivot tremendously over the course of this year, responding to just about every call that we had. The board itself has been a joy. That we started the year through a design thinking exercise where we really looked at what is it that makes up our membership, and really working from there to kind of drive a strategy forward and a way forward that was really focused on, again, the individual diversity of our membership and how do we make sure that we're providing that promise of value. So for me, the joy has just been to watch so many people engage in advancing our profession as a whole.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you for your leadership over this last year. It's meant a lot to all of us. And in this unprecedented time, you have shown true leadership. And we are deeply indebted to you for that volunteer service you've been providing to the profession. And it's not going to be forgotten anytime soon. So thank you so much. And Chris, I understand that you have a few people that you want to introduce us to this afternoon. Pretty incredible, important members, and those that have contributed to NACE and to the profession. So I think I'm going to turn it over to you at this point.
Absolutely.
And I'll see everyone else further on into the NACE Connect experience. Hope you have a good experience, everyone.
Thanks, Shawn. I am just absolutely delighted to introduce this year's inductees into the NACE Academy of Fellows. For those that don't know, the Academy of Fellows really recognizes individuals who have contributed to our profession, through the advancement of knowledge, leadership, and excellence in professional practice. The two individuals that we're inducting this year are Marilyn Mackes and Roxanne Hori, and they're going to be joining us here for a brief conversation. There they are. Hi, Marilyn. Hi, Roxanne.
Hello.
There we go. Hi.
Hi.
Operator
First off-
error, and I am.
Can you hear me?
First off, congratulations to both of you, and our immense gratitude for the wealth of talent, the wealth of knowledge, the wealth of leadership that the two of you have brought to our profession and to our association. For those of you who aren't aware, Roxanne was nominated by a plethora of leaders at EY, including former President Dan Black. Marilyn was nominated by a plethora of NACE leadership, including Kathleen Powell, former president from William & Mary. So as we kind of go along here, I just kind of wanted to explore a couple questions with you both to get to know you a little bit better, although I feel like I know you pretty well, at least Marilyn. I think we spent a lot of time together. But just a few questions to really help the rest of us really understand a little bit more about your passion and how you've come about receiving this award today. So, Marilyn, I'm going to start with you, if that's all right,
Sure.
because I'm having trouble controlling my mouse. Sorry about that. But Marilyn, obviously you've worked here for NACE for almost 25 years. What was it about that service that kept you in that position with a passion for so long? And why did you really feel the need to stay with NACE? I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Well, there are so many reasons, but I'm going to focus on just one or two. First of all, I want to say greetings to all of you out there. Yes, I miss you all, but yes, I love retirement, and I'm so glad to see Shawn in this role. So I can resist saying that. This profession that I landed in, quite honestly, I didn't grow up thinking that I would be the executive director for NACE or even end up in this profession that we all share. But it came as a result of being at an institution, a higher education institution, and realizing that I really did care a lot about the future, and particularly about the future workforce. I started out as a grad assistant, and originally I thought I was going to be an academician, a faculty member, or possibly even work in business and industry. But as it turns out, after hundreds of interactions with students and working on partnerships with faculty and our business partners, I realized that I really wanted to be a part of that. And then I landed, in a professional association world where I could see that all of those things kind of came together. So when I got to NACE, I realized that this is part of NACE's DNA, this whole idea of looking at the future and preparing people for the future. I think one other great reminder to me every single year of why I really cared so much about this field is when we would gather up all of our first timers, the newcomers at our annual conference. And they often numbered in the hundreds every single year. And to be able to interact with them and help them, support them, mentor with them, and help to move our future. And they're moving in roles which are going to have influence on the future of work and the workforce itself. That to me was part of the whole passion. So yeah, it kept me going all those years and loved every moment of it.
So now, speaking of passion and making an impact across our profession, I'm going to turn the next question to you, Roxanne. You've had the opportunity to work both on the employer side as well as the college side of our profession. Can you tell us a little bit about how you've been able to pivot as well as kind of your passion around the industry and around our profession as a result of kind of being on both sides?
Sure. The pivot was like they say, timing is everything. And I happened to get a call when I was working in an HR role. So I'd moved out of recruiting and was in a more different sort of HR role when I was at the Northern Trust Bank in Chicago. And I got a call from the Kellogg School saying, we want to tap into your network. A lot of people. We're looking for an assistant director. And I said, okay. So I went through all the resumes I had. I had maybe one person for Martha. And I said, here's somebody who might be a possibility. And I said, but maybe I'd be interested. And she said, really? And she goes, you wouldn't be in charge. I said, I think I'm okay with not being in charge. Because I think at that point, maybe it was president of MCPA. So like I had a lot, as a regional president on my plate. I also had a new child at home. And so the idea of maybe not being in charge of something was actually quite appealing to me. And so we chatted and I joined. And I think I'd always had, because of my regional association involvement, I had a fascination with higher ed, but had not ever thought, probably like most people, of going into higher ed until the opportunity presented itself. And by working in the careers office, I was able to actually leverage my knowledge of how both recruiting worked, how the financial services industry operated, and provide some insights that were, at that point in time, unique, in particular in the MBA space, for students. They just didn't have access to that. Most of the people that were in that office, in fact, everybody was in the office, had all been, I think most of them had a master's in higher ed or in guidance and counseling. And so they didn't have the industry experience, which now is fairly normal in the MBA space. But I think, being able to share what I had learned by running a recruiting function at a big bank in Chicago, through the professional organization work that I'd done on the regional level, and at that point, early stages of doing some stuff with NACE, which was CPC at the time, and all. Marilyn and I go back a long ways on that front. I think that it was bringing that mixture of the corporate experience and exposure and being able to help students really understand what was happening on the other side, because it always felt like a black hole to students. And I think in many ways it still feels like a black hole to students, but I also feel like the field has progressed so much that there's much more real-time information available, and employers are much more involved on campus than they were back in the old days. And I feel like I'm really dating myself, but employers are now do so much more to help students in understanding what the process is, and there's much more transparency than there was way back when.
Well, from reading the nomination, I think you had a lot to do with that. You were definitely an example of leading practices and helping to guide our profession forward. So as you kind of think back over the experiences that you've had, is there a really a moment in time or an accomplishment? Your accomplishments were many on that application. So is there a proudest moment for you with NACE or with your career?
I think, well, with NACE, I would say being able to, as much as I loved being on the board, it actually were some of the other things that I had a chance to do, which was serve on a strategic planning task force and then also on a search committee. And like those opportunities, because they're very specific, give you an opportunity to learn a tremendous amount about an organization, but also about working with across the board with so many other volunteers who were just as passionate as I, if not more so than I, about the organization and where we were at that point in time. I think professionally, for me, the thing that was probably the most impactful was how the dean at the time at the Kellogg School and I sort of responded after 9/11 happened back in 2001, and that his willingness to kind of take any of my harebrained ideas, which were all things just trying to figure out how are we going to try to save jobs and find jobs for students, and working with Deepak in terms of getting out there and talking to employers and talking to alumni and doing things which later on just have become de rigueur in the MBA and I think in the undergraduate world. But at that point in time, not many people were doing that. And I got criticized by it by my colleagues, some of my friends who were at other business schools saying, why are you spending your time doing that? I said, we've got to help these students find jobs. I said, we can't sit around doing nothing or just kind of hoping that things are going to come our way. And so the dean and I, did a road show, and the fact that we were on the road less than a month after 9/11 had happened, as he said, it's never going to be safer to fly. And he totally was right on that front. And he actually got a lot of great kudos from companies, and it helped our students tremendously in terms of securing jobs and making sure that we were showing companies our interest in understanding how they were operating, and obviously doing a lot of marketing. I was coming from a marketing school, so there was a lot of just like, hey, think of our students when you have needs. But it also was just trying to build those bridges and all, which I then continued to do with him and then with subsequent deans.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I remember those times well. And I was on the employer side at that point, and it was a real struggle to find out where can we still secure students, but what is the demand going to look like as a result of the situation around us, much like today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Marilyn, just the same sort of question. Obviously, your impact across our association and our profession was also very robust. What stands out for you as your proudest moment as executive director?
Well, I have to say, it's really tough to come up with a single proudest moment, but I thought a lot about this question since you gave me a heads up it could come. And I'm going to tell you that even though roughly 10 or so years ago, we were a 50-year-old organization, we still had done nothing really in the world of advocacy. And roughly about 10 years ago, collectively through our members and our board and our staff, we were able to really begin to make a difference in terms of taking a stand on issues, creating position statements, getting our members together at advocacy forums, both virtually and in person in DC. We were able to move forward on really having influence within the Department of Labor, Department of Education, to the point where we actually influenced some of the decisions that were being made about the interpretation of internships and how to define them. And of course, there have been a lot of issues during the last 10 years from a legislative perspective for both the employer side and the college side. But what I will say is that one of the proudest moments tied to that was when NACE got invited to participate in the Washington Higher Education Secretariat, which is an association of roughly the leaders of 40 plus associations nationally at the highest level. And that included university presidents groups and boards of universities. And what that meant is that NACE finally had a voice at the highest level and could in fact help not just have a single voice in the process of looking at what's going on around us at the federal level, but we could actually have it make a difference within that large group of kind of very important people within higher education. So I would say that whole idea of NACE moving forward and taking responsibility and making a commitment. And I think it's never been more important than it is right now. I mean, everything that we have been facing, and Chris, you raised a variety of topics at the beginning of the session, which I think are really, really challenging us as a profession to make sure that we are paying attention to these things and that we are making a difference, not just for our profession, but for society too. So yeah, I'm pretty proud of that for our group.
Absolutely. Thank you, Marilyn, for that leadership. So as we kind of start to think about going forward and knowing that we have so many individuals in our association that can stand up and share their voice and be part of actions moving forward to advance not only our association, not only our profession, but to your point, society. What advice would you give to our members as we start to move forward at this point?
I'll jump in, Roxy, if you want me to.
Yep, go ahead, Marilyn.
I would say, first and foremost, never stop learning. Never, ever stop learning. Continue to explore, expand, test yourself in new ways. That to me is the mark of a great professional, that, you know, we've never learned it all. And in fact, we should be sharing our learnings with each other in an ongoing way. I think it's always important to be there for others and to always say thank you for their support and service. We are a professional association. We are affiliated with each other. We are members, sisters and brothers, if you will, of each other. And I think we really need to value what that means. We learn from each other, we support each other, and we thank each other. And then finally, that's tied to the relationship piece. You know, I think, Chris, you've mentioned any number of times, you know, we have more than 13,000 individuals out there who, you know, business and industry, you know, our employers, our college members, our affiliate members. And those relationships make all the difference. And I think we need to understand that especially in these times that we're in right now, we need to continue to nurture and sustain those relationships in every way we possibly can, and also to continue to build new relationships. And I think this experience that we're having at this very moment is a great way for us to continue to do that. The experience that the NACE team has put together for this week for us to deliver this, what isn't an in-person conference, but is wonderful content and relationship building experiences. And it's a great way for us to realize the value of connection. The last thing I do want to say is that I think we need to make sure that we congratulate all of our award winners this week. I just want to say that before I'm finished speaking, because not only this year's award winners, but all of NACE's award winners, because they are the core in many ways of how we build and strengthen our organization. So congrats to all of them. Thanks.
Thank you, Marilyn. Roxanne, what about you? What advice do you have for our members as we continue to grow as an organization and as a profession?
Sure. But not too different from Marilyn, really. I think, you know, listen to each other, learn from each other, and listen in particular to the points of view that are very different from your own. I think there's so much to be learned, and NACE and the regional associations are such a safe space to me to test out ideas and in the relationships formed with each other to share those thoughts with people and kind of think them through. But really the listening piece, I think is really, really key. And that's obviously applies in a much broader sense in the world that we're all living and operating in today. And then seeking out the opportunities. This is very exciting to see where we're at as an organization in NACE, you know, delivering really rich content right now, all online. And so there's some really great opportunities. And this would have been a very painful thing had everything that's happened not happened, and probably wouldn't have happened. But now I feel like there's content that's more accessible to more people. That's a really exciting thing for us as a professional organization. So I think continuing to leverage that and to use tools like design thinking and others out there to think out of the box, because I think the institutions we're all associated with, especially on the higher ed side, is going to be forced to endure a lot of pain these coming years, and thinking out of the box is really, really important. Using each other for leverage and comfort, I think is really important as we go forward. And it feels like, from what I'm seeing through what's been happening this spring so far, you know, we're doing a good job, but there's more we can do. And I think, you know, there's such great leaders in the pipeline. So let's kind of use those people to help us think forward and sort of push ahead for all of us.
Absolutely. Thank you both, Roxanne and Marilyn, and congratulations to you both. Really appreciate all the contributions the two of you have made to NACE, to our industry, and to our profession. Very, very well deserved. Thank you all very much. So next, I'm very excited to present Jen Lasater. who will be joining the board as the president come July. And I am just so thrilled and looking forward to another amazing year with Jen at the helm. So Jen, welcome.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you for joining us. For those of you that don't know, Jen and her day job is Vice President of Career Services.
Yes,
All right,
that's
good.
good.
For Purdue Global. And Jen has been so involved in NACE over the years and has had just a tremendous amount of impact. Jen, obviously the question of the minute is, how excited are you to begin your year as president?
Well, thanks for the question, Chris. Obviously, I'm very honored to serve the membership in this way. It's an amazing honor for me. With a fantastic profession we're also lucky to work in, and our colleagues all across the globe have made such a difference in people's lives. And it's an honor to be able to represent such a great organization. So I'm looking forward to the next year.
Awesome. So speaking of the next year, what sort of things do you have planned for us?
Well, we've got a lot to do still. Every year we've got something else to do. So what's really important is going to be to meet our members and the profession's needs. Based on where we're at, where we're going as a profession, and thinking about all the changing dynamics of our world. So some key focus areas that we're going to be focusing on in the next year is prioritize focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, with a special focus on the NACE organization, as well as for our members across all of our offerings, programs, and services. Even more member engagement, confirming that NACE is the place where you get your information and resources. Also educating our membership on new innovations that are going to impact your current work to better prepare you for the future. I think many of us were thrown into the world of online. I was there a little earlier, but we want to be ahead of that to provide resources for everyone as they progress forward in the world of work. And then expanding our membership through new strategic partnerships and new member channels as well. There's a lot on the horizon, and in these unprecedented times, we have an opportunity to make a difference in the lives of our members and do it all together. As a profession, we've got a tremendous responsibility to mold the future workforce, and there's a lot for us to do today to meet all of those challenges. So I'm looking forward to all of those various challenges with all of you together. And Chris, you there?
I am, Jen, but I got taken off the video piece because I think now what we really want to do is thank you for your leadership. I'm very excited to continue to serve with you and look forward to an amazing year. And with that, I'm going to turn over the program now, completely over to you, and it's all you.
Great. So everyone, I get the privilege of introducing you to today's featured speaker, Johnny Campbell. Johnny is a serial disruptor in the world of hiring. As a founder and CEO of SocialTalent, the world's leading hiring skills platform, he works with some of the largest enterprises in the world, such as Intel, IBM, and IKEA, to drive hiring excellence in their organizations. Not content with professionalizing the roles of sourcers and full lifecycle recruiters, Johnny has now set his sights on steering the future of hiring. He's presented these concepts at some of the world's biggest hiring conferences across the world. And his dedication is matched only by his enthusiasm, making him one of the world's most sought after speakers on the topic of hiring. I will tell you, I saw Johnny a few years ago at a conference and I was like, NACE, you gotta get Johnny as a speaker. So I'm very excited to have you joining us today. And without further ado, here's Johnny.
Thanks, Jen. I really appreciate the intro. Whoa, I've got big boots to fill, I think now. You set high expectations. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining me. My name is Johnny Campbell. I'm joining you live from Dublin, Ireland. I couldn't be with you in person this year. And again, I think we're all Gutted that we couldn't meet up, but this is the safe way to do it. And it's a pleasure that the team at NACE were able to make this work virtually for us here. So I must warn you, I might get one of my 4 children walking in, which hopefully won't happen. But this is what happens in the modern world of virtual conferencing. But let me start with the technical stuff. Let me get my screen loaded up. So maybe if Chris or Jen can help me, I don't have the ability to screen share. If someone could turn that on for me, I'm going to try and load up my deck now and get started. So I got about 40 minutes, folks, with you. I'm going to try and talk for about 30 minutes. And then we have the opportunity to maybe have a Q&A. But please do join in on the chat. I'd love to kind of get your thoughts and questions on the chat, and I'll try and take as many questions as I can as we go through that. So please join in. Please ask your questions. Love to kind of hear that the sharing that goes live as well. So give me 2 seconds. I'm going to get this right. We got to get all my technical bits. I will be the first person who has to actually go ahead and share a screen, and I've made a boo-boo with PowerPoint. So bear with me here. Okay, and bring that back to. Here we go. Okay. All right. Trust me, this goes wrong in person as well. So, you know, nothing new here. There we go. Now I'll just ask everybody, is that working okay? Can everybody see my screen just fine? Maybe hopefully somebody can give me a shout. Maybe Chris or Jen, who might have a microphone, can let me know if that's working okay. You should be able to see the hiring skills platform on screen.
We can see it now. But now you're on mute.
Oh yeah. How's that? Can you hear me now, Chris?
Yes, you're good.
Okay, right, let's go. Technical glitch is over. Right, so what I want to talk to you about this afternoon is kind of the distance between reality and expectation. I want to talk to you about, if you look at a triangle of the parties involved in early career hiring, you have typically the graduates or the potential employees, you've got the employer, and you've got the college or university. And my hypothesis is that there is a misalignment between the 3 of those. I want to explore some of the current realities, talk to you about how that might be accelerated by COVID, and try and give you perspectives from all of those 3 different sides to kind of talk about how career services and graduate employers can perhaps do better to capture, you know, something in the middle of that reality that we're faced with. So the last 3 months, you can't ignore this. In hiring, it's been so impactful. And there's a lot of negative things that can come out of COVID-19. Of course, we look at graduate unemployment, we look at offers being rescinded, we look at placements not happening this summer that would have otherwise happened. And there's a lot of negativity. But on the positive side, in the words of Satya Nadella at Microsoft, one of the big things we've seen in the last 3 months is transformation accelerated like we've never seen before. So Satya's quote is that we've seen 2 years worth of digital transformation in 2 months. I know many organizations who had a 5-year plan crammed into 5 weeks. We're seeing this across the board. We're seeing it today in this virtual conference where we have to find new ways of working. We have to change the way that we deliver services to whoever that customer is. And I think education and hiring are no strangers to this. We're seeing massive changes in education. We're seeing massive changes in hiring. And as a provider of education, which is what SocialTalent is, you know, we are a provider of professional education around hiring for large enterprises. We're used by large enterprises to educate their entire workforce on how to hire better. And yes, we have been a digital first platform from well, not quite day one, call it year 4. We've been, you know, at the bleeding edge of a lot of that, but all of a sudden, the last 3 months have changed that even for organizations like us who are trying to provide education in the professional world. We're seeing massive change forced upon us. But the graduates in particular are being affected. We're seeing, you know, for graduates coming out, we're looking into 25% unemployment in a lot of markets. Many graduates of 2020 will be graduating online. And, you know, unfortunately, as surveyed by NACE, more than 1 in 5 employers are saying that they're rescinding their summer internship offers. So again, the picture is not necessarily as expected for graduates coming out in the market today. And it was already going to be difficult. The graduates today coming out are the kind of latter end of the Gen Z grads. They're facing into a world that is uncertain. And that's probably the biggest issue that graduates face this year, is the unbelievable uncertainty about what life will look like now and going forwards. But if you look at the role of the university, the role of the college, most universities and colleges are ranked by how many of those graduates can they get employed. And getting students to graduation day and then employed is benefiting colleges when it comes to college rankings. And for many colleges and universities, it's the driving force, not the only force, but unfortunately, that's the way a lot of the rankings work, that it drives the rankings, which drives, of course, the business model of universities and colleges to get students in and to work with employers. So it's kind of a catch-22 situation. You're stuck in the drivers of college rankings, which unfortunately are mainly driven by what percentage of graduates are employed. You might wonder why I'm saying unfortunately, because I'm not sure it should be the primary driver. I understand the historical nature of it, but I'm not sure it should be the primary driver. And I want to explore that with you. So that's where I look at the concept of recruitability. Recruitability is the primary focus of educational institutions when it comes to graduates. How can we get these graduates into jobs? How can we help them get recruited? And that's where the focus has been perhaps updated for the social world, but it's about how do we get a certain percentage of our graduates employed within X months of graduation. And a lot of that is performed around prepping them for what used to be their resume prep has perhaps been upgraded to a LinkedIn profile prep. In the modern world, it might be, rather than getting them prepared for an assessment center, it might be, how do I do a video interview, a video assessment, as employers shift that model. And this, I'd argue, is a very traditional focus. How do I actually go through the mechanics of helping a graduate find an opportunity, engage with an employer, do an interview, and get the job? And it's quite binary and it's quite limited in its scope, this concept of recruitability. Unfortunately, only 27% of students, about a quarter of students, actually end up working in the field of their major over time. And this number has been shrinking and shrinking and shrinking over the last few decades. It used to be a case that if you wanted to be an engineer, you go to college, become an engineer, and that's your career for life. You want to be an accountant, you go study commerce or business or accounting, you get into accounting, and that's your career for life. That isn't the reality of the world today. It wasn't the reality even going into COVID-19, into this pandemic. We're in the gig economy. We're in an economy where you have the highest percentage of graduates claiming that they would like to be their own bosses. They want to run their own business. There's this drive to explore different career opportunities, even when pursuing what you might consider quite traditional undergraduate degrees. And it's quite understandable because we live in a world, even today, 3-4 months into COVID-19, where there's an ever quickening change in the actual jobs that are out in the marketplace. Who'd have thought 10 years ago that you could apply for a job as a podcast producer in a large corporate? It just doesn't make sense. Or in a recruiting team, as we see in a lot of the recruiting teams that we work with. There are many, many jobs that just didn't exist 10 years ago that exist today. And the predictions by pretty much everybody, whether it's McKinsey's or Deloitte or EY, suggest that the time frame for the jobs to evolve and change is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So the job that you may be hired for may not exist when you actually go to college at 17, 18 years of age. And that's a kind of weird kind of paradigm. You've got to make a choice about the curriculum that you pursue, not necessarily knowing if the job that you want will exist in 4 years' time, or what that job might be, because it may not exist today. And that's a different environment to, for example, someone like me who graduated back in, 1998, what I came out into. So it's not surprising that the typical path is kind of more of a swirl than a straight line. We may take a job and then we take a different job. We may pursue a career for 3-4 years and then change into something else. And we may mix between gig work and permanent work all through that time. Graduates may feel like they have to pursue a career in their major, and career advisors need to work with those students to get them ready for the idea that they will have to work outside of their major and make sure they're open to that as well. to give them not just a route to get to the career that they want to go in, but still during their time in college or university to actually help them understand what the different options are, and not even to lock into any one option. I think the modern graduate isn't locking into one option. She has many options. She may be a legal graduate, but a legal background and coming out of college with an undergraduate degree in law doesn't mean you're going to work in law. Not anymore. It's a broad business subject, perhaps, that could be used to launch your career into many different areas. And you're seeing this increasingly with graduates. Previously by choice before COVID-19, but it might not be their choice post-COVID-19. It might be, how can I take my skills, my experience, my desires, and put them to work in a role or a company that would work best for me? But employers, if you look at the employer perspective, it's a perspective that I'm dealing with the most. Employers are changing their mind in terms of what graduate or early career hiring looks like. Many employers are changing the model around even the pursuit of a student with a certain GPA and saying, maybe the GPA doesn't count so much. Maybe we have better ways of vetting the suitability of that student for our roles, for our organization. So why would I trust the GPA average when I could perhaps run my own assessment? And if you believe, as many employers do today, with more sophisticated technology coming into play, with great new tools being put to play for assessment online, gamified tools that allow you to have graduates experiment and play games online that reveal patterns of behavior that can scientifically be proven to correlate with performance in an organization, built per organization. Tools like Pymetrics and others, which many of you are perhaps very familiar with, replacing some of the more outdated or traditional methods of assessment that employers have used for decades. Are they the right tools? Are they the wrong tools? It doesn't really matter, because employers are increasingly looking to these AI-driven tools as a method to actually understand, is this person going to work out in our organization? And if they believe that their model is more predictive of success in their organization, why would I rely on the GPA average of that graduate? Why would I care which college or university they actually came out of? I want this person to be ready with the right skills for me to assess and then decide if they're going to be a fit in our organization. And increasingly, organizations are looking at softer skills, or the human skills. You see this in the LinkedIn skills surveys from LinkedIn Learning every year, the increasing focus on things like deep technical skills, things like data science and development, which are for the niche of undergraduates out there. But for the wider group, it's a focus on communication skills, and those softer or more interpersonal skills. They are predicted to be, by McKinsey, to be the fastest growing and most abundant skills in demand over the next decade. It's certainly what we see in SocialTalent when we look at professionals in the workplace. We see that demand for softer skills, for interpersonal skills, is outpacing the technical skills of how do you actually do a job. And so you have to ask yourself, is this something that undergraduates are being prepared for? So there's definitely a disconnect between what employers are increasingly looking for from early career hires and what many colleges and universities are geared up towards and incentivized for as well. I'll go back to a 2017 Gallup study that noted that, when reviewing institutions' effectiveness at preparing students for the workforce, you have this disconnect where 96% of chief academic officers of colleges believe that their institutions are either very or somewhat effective at preparing students. But only 11% of business leaders strongly agreed with those statements. It's a massive disconnect. And you see this all the time, and it's difficult for universities, because universities are typically stuck in slower paces to change curriculum and to evolve. Employers are private, they can do what they want, they can change their requirements at pace. Not many of the large enterprises do that, but they can at least do that. And I do understand the tension between the academic world and the private world of employment. But there is a big disconnect there. What the kind of expectations or confidence that many universities have is very mismatched with what employers' expectations of those universities are. When you pull back to the student for a second, 80% of students enter college for career prospects. That's their number one reason to go to college or university. They want to develop better career prospects. They read all the literature that correlates, having a degree, whether it's a primary or master's degree, and how much extra that represents in terms of earning over their lifetime and the opportunities that opens up to them. And 34% believe they will graduate with the skills and 36% with the knowledge they need to be successful in the job market and the workplace. That's not a great number, right? You go 80% go in for more career prospects, and about a third believe they'll actually graduate with the skills and the knowledge they need to be successful in the job market and the workplace. And the job market is one thing, the workplace is a completely different thing altogether. So we look at what's happening on campus. 39% of students surveyed say they've never visited their school's career services office or used their online resources. And students rarely seem to consult their school's career service office for help finding a job after they've graduated, only 18%. Which begs the question, where are they getting advice? And they are getting immense value from their universities, but it's perhaps coming from different areas. The majority of graduates say that they receive the best career advice from professors, from lecturers, from the faculty staff, rather than the career office. And students would give more value on the advice from perhaps one of their lecturers or professors than they would from someone in career services, which is crazy because one person is literally working full time to try and help them develop their career, and the other person is lecturing them on a particular topic or area. So again, what is the disconnect? So to me, the more I talk to employers, the more I talk to career teams, because I go in and work with a lot of career office teams to try and help them get a perspective of what the outside world looks like. And many of them are very progressive. And many of them have already in the last decade moved towards this concept of employability. Everyone has the same objective at heart, which is to help undergraduates, to help graduates and early career individuals get a job and have a successful career. But really, the focus on just preparing yourself for recruitability is not enough. Just helping somebody find and get a job, yes, it's a line in the sand. It's a good marker to understand that somebody's got a job. But really, it doesn't address the issues that the student actually has, which is, how do I understand what I want to do, what I should be doing, and how do I develop in this period of 2, 3, 4 years, the right skills to allow me to enter that workplace and be successful. I'll give you an analogy of a friend of mine who runs a software company. He's got 3 kids, and he's been employing many, many people over the last 2 decades in his software business, quite a large software business. And at home, now his wife hates him for this. I'm gonna be honest here, but I do like the idea academically. He has his kids using Agile in the home. He has them on sprints. He basically has scrum boards up in his kitchen where he gives them tasks to do. Again, I must inform you, his wife hates this idea, but my friend Shane uses this because his logic is he wants to prepare his kids for a workplace that will probably incorporate agile working in 2-week sprints as teams and collaborating rather than just traditional chores. Will it work out? Let's wait and see. But parents are focused on these kind of things. It would be remiss of education institutions not to be the same. And that is, how can you actually prepare somebody for the reality of working? And it isn't just going to be the responsibility of somebody to come along and help them prepare a resume or LinkedIn profile. It's about, how do I basically get them to experience the workplace? So it's certainly a good start to focus on mentorships, internships, and I've no doubt everybody here involved in third level education is absolutely doing that. But it goes a little bit deeper in terms of, how do you actually enable them over a 2, 3, 4 year period to actually develop those skills, so that when they do an assessment with an employer, or they actually go into the workplace on an internship, the employer is seeing how they're putting things like resilience or agile working into practice, and how are they doing that really well. And this, I'd argue, is about moving past what we might call hygiene factors. The hygiene factors being the basics, how to help somebody find and secure a job. And it's about, excuse the typo here, lobbying for a more integrated approach to employability. So I see, in my world, in the employer's world, I see recruiters becoming much more integrated into the business, to not just be somebody who helps fill a job, but there's this move towards being much more an advisor, where that recruiter is working inside the business with the different managers and leaders to help shape their ideas about how they could hire, who they could hire or retrain to get work done. And this movement's been going on for several years in organizations where you're partnering to achieve the right outcome for the company. I think the same should be true of universities and colleges. And it is, thankfully, the case in many colleges and universities today, but perhaps still not enough, where you look to career services as the experts who work with the entire university to help them solve this problem. So this is about how you incorporate business and work skills, not only as a secondary element to the side, but as something that's integral in terms of how you teach and how the university approaches its academic curriculum. So for example, if I'm a professor in history, I would like to know how could I incorporate building resilience as a skill into how I teach history to my undergraduates. That's something I don't have experience in. I was hired as a history professor. But how can career services and those responsible for employability help lecturers, professors, and the academic world understand what's required to integrate, skills and practice of the real life work skills that employers are looking for into the broader curriculum? Less than 20% are probably doing this, and it's different in different parts of the world. You see one trend in the UK of quite progressive. You see mainland Europe not very progressive in this direction at all, unfortunately. You see a real mix in North America. But it really is not just upgrading the old school hygiene factors to incorporate a digital world. It's a fundamental rethinking of this. It's looking at from the, you look at the student's perspective. They look to the lecturers, they look to the professors, they look to the academic staff for help. They look to them for advice. They are favoring that more than career services. But career services probably could offer better advice. It's just not integrated. And it's about integrating that we're talking about. There are some great examples. Northeastern, many of you might know well, in Boston, pioneered this several years ago with their cooperative education program, where they're kind of doing this experiential learning. And there's many other universities and colleges across the country doing this, where they are really trying to embed the real life skills of the workplace into the curriculum and mixing that up. And it's not just the right direction for helping the students get jobs, but it also gives the opportunity for an undergraduate to experience what it would be like as an engineer. She can try the work placement in 1 year or one semester, and then try a different workplace in a later semester. So that by the time she's graduating, she's got a real feel of all the different types of roles out there, that she's consulted with her lecturers to understand what options are out there, given their feedback, and had the full support of professional career advisors working with everyone in that academic institution to bring that to life for her. So employers and career advisors, 65% of employers say that those relations are very effective at providing talent. So there is real benefit from the knowledge and skills and experience of career advisors. And 61% mentioned that maintaining or improving those relationships is a priority. Employers want these strong bonds with academia. They want to be more involved in the process. They want to be more integrated. But it's not effective enough just to bring in an employer to do a lecture to a bunch of undergraduates. That's not enough. It's about taking their advice on what are the real life skills that you are seeing needed in the organization. We're seeing the talent teams and some of the biggest employers in the world doing really inventive things. We have a customer, one of the largest outsourced IT companies in the world, Cognizant, customer of ours, 120,000 employees worldwide. And Cognizant's talent team have been building in-house curriculums to train individuals who are coming out of college to basically get the skills that they need in a 90-day period to actually be usable on the job with their customers. They're literally taking the raw materials, which they see as individuals who are numerate, and they don't rely on their GPA average for numeracy. They put them through a numeracy test of their own, and they look at their entrepreneurial skills. Again, an in-house test that they developed. Anybody could apply for those tests. You get in on the program, and they put together a combination of what was on-site job shadowing with online training, intensively over 90 days, and they turn you into a Java developer or a Salesforce consultant or a marketing expert. And this program that they pioneered about 3-4 years ago in Europe has been rolled out across the world. And many other employers are adopting that as their talent strategies change, and they try and fill the gap where they're seeing that the universities and college aren't quite providing them with the right skills, but how do they augment that and build it? I'd argue that you need to push back and work with those employers because they are really hungry for help to try and develop these programs. And they will be better served by real professionals working on that. And when students feel prepared and know what they want, it's important to then understand the employer side, because employers aren't perfect. They're not doing everything right either. And you got to understand what the graduate is also looking for from an employer perspective. And the modern graduate is facing into a world where there's a disconnect, of course, with their college or university about how they're being prepared for the workforce. But it's also a massive disconnect in terms of how an employer sees them and understands them. We're seeing this change where employers are being put under massive pressure, particularly from early career hires, to change the way that they hire. Organizations that previously would have had a decentralized method of hiring, different opcos, different countries, different departments hiring differently. That's not tolerated by the modern graduate. The modern graduate experiences your organization by the brand on Snapchat or Instagram or Twitter, or what's being said, probably less on Facebook if I'm going to be honest these days, but they're seeing what's being said about your organization in the press or on media, and that is shaping their view of your organization. You don't control that anymore. And what you do in Singapore influences what somebody in San Francisco thinks of your company. You are a global organization if you're a hiring organization around the globe. Everything your business does or touches impacts the impression that that potential graduate has on their view of you. They want an experience that is seamless. They want a simple career site. Again, gone are the days where your graduates will tolerate a 1.5 hour form filling exercise on your website that if it crashes halfway through, they lose their entire application. They certainly are time poor. They do not tolerate non-digital experiences. And if some other employer is going to do it better and easier, they're going to go for them instead. And they expect that your hiring process, the interviews, are consistent no matter where they go to work. They're mobile. They'll move state, they'll move country. And if I start an interview in one state, I want to go to another state, I expect that organization, that hiring team to pick up the process where I left off. And employers are failing many, many graduates this way. But graduates are always also being driven by the consumer experiences all around them. Not just how employers or colleges or universities act, but the impact of Amazon personalization, where they expect a world where Amazon just understands who they are. Like how many of you on the call buy something on Amazon and regularly purchase something you never intended to purchase? I do this all the time. I go looking for item A, I come away with item A, B, and C. Because that's how sites work these days, particularly e-tail sites like Amazon. They understand who you are. They understand your patterns. They've got cookies tracking you and tracing you all over the web. And they give you very personalized suggestions and experiences. And they're usually quite correct. If you look at a 19, 20-year-old, 22-year-old graduate coming out of college these days, if this is the world she's grown up in, and then they have to make choices, they have to give inputs into their career, they expect the world to just know what they want and suggest it to them. That is the experience they want from both the university and the employer. Tell me, what am I suitable for? Is their attitude, not how do I look up the jobs suitable for my undergraduate degree or my sector or my experience. They want to say, here's me, what have you got for me? And how they transact is important. Again, we're prepping people for LinkedIn profiles more than resumes these days, which is great. But again, this cohort, they're not expecting to have to fill out forms anymore. You walk into a store these days, particularly those of you who've been in lockdown, who've been staying at home. You know, I go to the store these days. I've got 4 young boys. My eldest is 11. I have twins who are 5. I have a 1.5-year-old. I got the 1.5-year-old on my arm. I'm going up to the till to pay. I want to tap up my watch and I want to walk away. That's how I want to pay for stuff. I don't want to be carrying stuff like a phone or a wallet. I don't want to have to be taking out cash, particularly in a COVID-19 world. I want to transact with touch and walk away. So you think about the transaction, these individuals want to transact in the same way. When you apply for a job, when you go work, want to express my interest in working for your organization, it should be seamless. That is the world that they expect. It's not the world that's out there for the majority of organizations. They don't present that kind of process, but increasingly, if you want to fight for the real cream of the talent, you're going to have to conform to that expectation. And tracking is important. Again, you have so much uncertainty in the world. I mentioned that at the start. With so much uncertainty, at least give me certainty about the process. I can spend $20 on a pizza with Domino's, and I can track it from the oven to my dorm. Yet I can apply for a job with you that's going to be hopefully set me up for the rest of my career, pay back some of the tuition money that I spent. And once I apply, I have no idea what happens for weeks, months on end. Again, that expectation is just not going to be there anymore. They're going to expect to be able to track everything, know where they are in the process, who they're up against, what the percentage chances are, because that's the experience they get from everything that's out there. And you got to do virtual well. For the employers watching, you got to make sure that you're ready as well. So there's, again, I mentioned, universities and colleges have to perhaps rethink or adjust how they're preparing undergraduates for employability rather than recruitability. But as employers, you need to be ready for this world as well. You got to do virtual well, more than ever. Video interviewing, there's no going back on video interviewing. There's still so many people who say, we need to see them in person. That's the way we need to do it. I think we've all learned that we can do a lot on video and virtually that we never expected we could do. Your team, your recruiting team, again, we've been sending recruiters out on campus all over the country, state by state, trying to spend our money wisely. How can we do this? I was in Japan last year with a hiring team with one of the biggest employers in Japan, and they were wondering how can they beat the big competitors to them, which were Google and other companies like that, in the race for top graduates. And yet I asked them about their process, and they were saying, we're still, sending people on campus, we're sponsoring buses, we're doing all these traditional things. I said, well, what wins the war? And they said, well, it's the person who spends the most money. That's it. Most money on advertising wins the war. And they named a competitor who was winning the talent because they just threw money at the problem. But we explored further and found a couple of really, really progressive employers that were being smart. They were running everything virtually. This was last year, before COVID-19, running seminars, events, virtual happy hours. They were targeting and retargeting people online through social, through digital, through the web, so that the name of the brand kept coming up. The stories kept being shared on different feeds. You'd scroll down Instagram and see a story shared by somebody who worked there, a day in the life, whatever it might be. Being smart about these digital experiences and following the journey of the graduate, meeting them where they are. And that is the reality of the world we live in. It's been accelerated by COVID-19. So how are you structuring your virtual team to do virtual recruiting in this space as well? And this summer, we're facing probably the first en masse summer of interns and new hires being onboarded virtually for the first ever time. Very different experience. And are you ready for that? It's so important to acclimate to a company's culture in your early weeks. Are you providing the best experience in doing that? Are you doing good pre-boarding activities? And pre-boarding activities might last a year before somebody actually joins in your organization. So again, there's a lot that the employers need to rethink and reshape there as well. So if I look at the world of early career hiring as we come out of hopefully the worst of COVID-19, I see that to meet each other, we have to have a reframing of the expectations of all three parties here. I expect we're not going to be able to probably move the graduate too much. She has an opinion of the world. She's of that age, perhaps, where she's quite confident that her opinion is the only opinion that counts. So it means that we're probably going to have to get the employers and the colleges and universities to move more towards where she is, to meet her where she is. And there's no point in arguing that, well, the economic conditions have changed. They have to meet us where we are. That's just not going to be the way it's going to be. And it will probably change back quite fast. And don't forget that the skills that employers most want, they didn't exist in the right quantities before this. They still don't exist in the right quantities. The demand is still outstripping the supply for those in-demand skills. So career services need to support and work within their universities and colleges to get the college or university to look at it more holistically, to allow them to not just take a step back, but to become more involved and embed career services in everything that the university and college does. Graduate employability is not just the responsibility of career services, I would argue. You can't just outsource it to that team who do it full time and expect it all to work. It has to be seen as the entire college or university's responsibility. Just like hiring is the entire organization's responsibility and not just the recruiting team, it's the same within a college. It's the entire institution's responsibility. Career advisors, employers need to work together and meet in the middle in terms of expectations. And hopefully graduates need to be a bit more adaptable. And we need to help them prepare. So the influencing to say, this is the world of the employer. It's a little bit different to what you expect. How can you meet them in the middle? And employers need to update their hiring processes even faster than they perhaps expected to recruit graduates in this modern world. So these are the changes we're seeing. These are some of the themes that we're seeing. And we've got I know a bunch of questions already come in over the chat that we'll hopefully have time to think. But I wanted just to get everybody thinking. You might not fully agree with everything I'm saying, but I wanted to just share with you my perspective of what I'm seeing from the different sides involved in early career hiring these days and the trends that were there before. I'm not the first person to point these out by no means, but I think COVID-19, to take Satya's quote from Microsoft, is accelerating all of these trends in everything that we're doing in education and in hiring today. So I'll pause there and maybe we can jump back into some of the questions. Jen, if you're comfortable with that, I can take some of the questions and comments that have been shared through the chat, or if anyone wants to jump in and ask them, I'm more than happy. We still have a couple of minutes.
Thanks, Johnny. Yeah, I think we can definitely take a few minutes for questions. I know we had a few. If anybody's got anything that they are dying to ask, go ahead and ask in the chat. And while you're doing that, Johnny, would you mind sharing, and I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but I remember a few years ago when I heard you speak for the first time, you spoke about IQ, EQ, and LQ. Could you share that position with the group? I think it ties in nicely with everything discussed today.
Absolutely. So this is a good friend of mine, Jennifer Carpenter. At the time, she was running global recruiting for Accenture. She's recently moved to IBM, where she took up the position of global head of TA in February. But Jen was with Accenture for 16 years. So she'd been with the organization a long time. And she shared with the audience, I think it was in Talent Connect 3 years ago, this fall, Jen, that Accenture had moved over the 16 years she'd been with the business from initially hiring based on IQ. Who are the smartest people? Let's hire all these smart people, right? Don't forget, Accenture is an employer of, I think, 500, 600,000 people. They're a massive employer. And they go for those critical skills. They're always at the forefront of that. But they learned that IQ wasn't enough. And in fact, it shouldn't even be their focus. And they matured their hiring approach to focus on EQ. EQ, which might be more of the softer skills we talk about, the emotional skills. And as the market accelerated and as we saw the change in roles and skills change more and more rapidly, which it hasn't let up since then, they realized that there was no point in trying to keep up. If they spent all of their time trying to figure out what is the next new thing you have to hire for, they just never win that race. Instead, they realized that they need to hire adaptable people who have what they call a higher LQ, or learning quotient. So how could you hire people who could be adaptable, who could change? So if you come in saying, I'm a lawyer for life, that's not really what Accenture are looking for. They know that in 5 years, 10 years, they probably need you to be something different because their customers demand something different. Everything is changing. The business pace is evolving faster and faster. And this LQ, this ability to learn, became their most important factor. And I've seen this across other organizations. I've seen so many organizations since then. I spoke the following year and the year after about how an increasing number of organizations have merged their hiring or recruiting teams with their talent development teams in-house, because they recognize the same within their own organization, that it isn't just a case of, well, someone in sales stays in sales, someone in marketing stays in marketing. They have to basically prepare their staff for this cross-transferability of skills and the option to jump outside of your career, if you like, and do something else. And what I don't see, though, is that pace of change happening fast enough in the college or university world. It's definitely happening. I think there's a need for that to happen faster, for there to be a recognition that these institutions and the institutions that you're involved in, as Jen, I think is a pioneer in this as well, to make them more ready for a world where there isn't going to be certainty. In fact, uncertainty is the new status quo. You have to adapt and move on.
Excellent, thanks. Looks like we have a question here from Debbie about international students. Do you hear a lot about OPTs? Obviously, your focus is more in Europe right now, but are you hearing anything on OPT right now when it comes to the US or internationally?
I'm not, no. So again, I more look at the holistic global view of hiring.
Yeah.
And when I've looked into it on a region by region basis, I see that it's roughly the same. You know, I work in markets where every market tells me it's different here. I go, okay, it's different here. Let me do my research. Let me talk to your people. Let me talk to the graduates. Let me talk to you how it works. And I've yet to find a market. And that's why Japan was one of the ones I thought, you know, Japan maybe is different. And I accepted the fact that I had no experience in Japan. Everyone had told me Japan's different to Asia. Asia is different to the rest of the world. And I went into Japan last fall and I did my research for 3 months, met with lots of teams, talked to different individuals on both sides and realized it's the same. Because the graduate is so much more internationalized than ever before, because the media that influences us is so global, and the messages are all the same, that regionalization is lessening increasingly over time. So that's just, if I can give you a perspective on just the differences in terms of different regions, they're less and less every year.
Okay. We have another question about digital credentialing and the difference between skills and 4-year degrees. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I think digital credentialing has amazing value, and it's not for everybody, right? So again, I can't make a sweeping statement that it's now the thing, everyone's into it. You have progressive employers and you have employers who are not progressive. There was an employer mentioned earlier, I won't rename them, but I know in their organization, they have pockets of the world that are being really open, and they're looking at things like credentials, digital credentials as acceptable ways to basically benchmark somebody against a peer who's perhaps gone to a university. But I know other parts of the world where their leaders are just, nope, that's not the way we do things around here. We're not prepared to hire that way. So you even have disconnects within the same organization in different parts of the world, different states. It hasn't emerged, there's no standard there. But I think you'll find that when it comes to in-demand skills, credentials and digital credentials will increasingly become the de facto standard. We saw this in software development. Software development is probably one of those areas where you look and say most people get hired without a formal degree or qualification. It's purely experience or digital credentials that get you there, because it's an area that's changed so fast that traditional academia hasn't kept up with that. And so you see most people getting their job as a programmer by the digital credentials they've picked up, or they're self-taught online. So I think that trend will follow for in-demand skills where there's a massive shortage. I think if there's an abundance of talent, I think you're just not going to rely on digital credentials as much. You're going to be just more traditional in your approach. But if you're talking about an area like data science or development or inside sales, SaaS sales, I think people will absolutely gravitate towards digital credentials, because there's just so few people in that market, that talent market. You have to have something, or anything that you can get is okay. But the more and more areas or professions that we see digital credentials becoming the norm in, I think it will begin to bleed into other more traditional professions.
Excellent, thanks. We also have another question about how to make employer events worth attending for students. So can we get some more specifics from you on what employers can do in collaboration with career services to get students to attend in-person events once campuses are back open?
Yeah, employers, graduates, any potential employee, they don't want to talk to recruiters, right? And this is the mistake a lot of organizations make, is they put recruiters out there, right? Recruiters are there to keep the wheels going, right? Just like, you know, if I can use the analogy again, I know there's been some pushback from the comments already. The career advisors aren't the people that hold the responsibility or hold the weight of or the gravity of trust. And recruiters don't hold the gravity of trust in an organization. So if organizations and universities, it's the peers. So they'll look up to the lecturer, because that's somebody perhaps who works in the same area as them or is knowledgeable about the same field that they have a passion in. And in the employers camp, they want to talk to people who look and feel just like them, who have the same passions, who are perhaps them in 5 years or 10 years. And as much as possible, they want to relate to them. You know, do they come from the same background as me? Is their story similar? So traditional things like, this person went to the same campus as me, they came from the same socioeconomic background, so therefore I want to hear their story. If you look at works digitally, you know, applicants are attracted to the stories. First of all, it's the stories of people who seem to look and feel like them. I say look and feel because it does come down to those basics. So if you look at really good career sites that are attracting graduates, they represent a range of people in their current organization and allow you as a potential employee to explore the journey with them. I would say if you're looking at in-campus or real life, you have to do the same thing. You have to think about, again, going back to representation, you have to look at your potential audience and think about who's in here, who are the different personas in my potential audience, and am I best representing all the different examples or as many of those examples as possible? Not just do I have a man, a woman, a person of color, a person not of color. What are their stories? What are their backgrounds? Where have they come from? And you want to try and give students the opportunity to speak with those, and preferably in more and more unstructured, informal ways. So yes, you got to do your formal presentations, and here's the head of the department talking. But really, I've seen some great examples, more progressive examples, where massive US companies hiring in Asia are trying to attract people in North America back to places like China, Japan, Korea, and they're hosting virtual career fairs where you're for 2 hours, you're having a virtual happy hour. You got a bunch of people who already work in the organization there. There's a small amount of formal presentations, and then it's just Q&A. And hey, do you want to ask Roger a question? Do you want to ask Diane a question? And it's just much more informal. And they're having really high success rates in terms of closing out interested applicants at the end of those virtual career fairs. So I think it's the informality, it's people like us, which means many things to many people. And being deliberate about your attempts to do that, I think, is how you'll set yourself up for success.
Excellent, thanks. We have another question from the group. They agree that students and graduates want a more immediate response when they apply to jobs or even their status in the application process. Do you see more employers moving in the direction of quicker responses?
Yeah, I think it's less about quicker responses and more about quicker systems. So I don't phone Domino's and ask them where my pizza is. They've built it into the system. And I think that's the critical thing. It's impossible to provide personalized responses to everybody. It's impossible, right? At the volume that most of us do graduate hiring at, and it's going to be even bigger in terms of volumes this season and next season, okay? But I think you build it into your system. I was in Beijing 5 years ago working with Oracle, and they showed me what they built on WeChat for their graduate hiring. WeChat being their kind of online messenger / WhatsApp type platform. 5 years ago, you could apply for a job on WeChat using your WeChat ID, and you basically sent your application, instantly sent you back a reference number, and you can message their WeChat channel, the Oracle WeChat channel, whenever you want with your reference number, and it spat back your status. So it pinged their HRIS system back with the status. You're at this status in our system, and the person was like, "Great, real time." So again, the modern employee or potential candidate doesn't even want to talk to you, right? Again, I don't have to ring the person. Like, that's an inefficient service, or email and wait for a person to respond to me. Again, I'm a Gen Xer. I grew up thinking that that's the best way to engage with somebody. They want instant. They want it driven by, I can send an ID or click on a button and I can get the information myself, that control piece. So it's how do you build a system that gives the control to the candidate to find that information out whenever she wants, 24/7.
Excellent. All right, I think we are caught up on questions, but I just want to do a final shout out to see if anyone had anything else. I think everyone's minds are blown and they're funneling through everything that was shared in the last hour. So one more from Dan at EY. And I think Dan is typing, so we'll give him a minute. And Dan asks, I get the immediacy, but don't they also want personal towards the end, the personalization piece?
That's a great point, Dan, right? So Dan, you've nailed this in terms of there's two parts of the process. There's getting myself into the consideration set, and which is one process. And for there, they don't care. It's a numbers game. It's basically, I got to get in touch with some people. I got to get into the consideration set. And then you move into a second phase where, in the first phase, I'm just going to apply to a set of employers that seem fine in the area I'm going for and play the numbers game. When I get called forward, then I'm like, okay, I'll engage. So I'm going to now take the time to research them, look up the company, see what other graduates have to say about them, read their career sites. I'm going to engage now and see which ones I like. And now I expect a personalized approach. And again, we need to think about this when we're attracting candidates. We talk about how candidates research us, they look up our career site, they look up us in Glassdoor, and then they apply. No, they just apply to loads of stuff based on, you're not a bad employer, so I'll send out my application. You're in my consideration set. And then when you engage back with me, I'll now take the time to actually make a bit of effort. And not all of them, just a selection of those. So I agree, Dan, the early part is about volume. It's about speed. It's about no touch. They want a digital experience only. But once you're into that second consideration set, once you've had the engagement, we'd like to have a conversation with you. Then it becomes personal. So it's about trying, don't try and make it digital across the whole spectrum. You're dead right, Dan. But don't, undersell your ability, overstretch yourself by trying to make it personal across the whole experience. You got to do different things depending on where the applicant is in that process.
Excellent. And it looks like Dan agrees the personalized approach comes further down in the funnel. So thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Johnny. Thank you for joining us this evening from Dublin. We really appreciate it. And if everybody could take a moment, fill out the survey. The link is in the chat box if you haven't already clicked on it. And don't forget, we've got 2 full weeks of content here at NACE Connect, and we can't wait to see you at many of our upcoming sessions and look forward to your feedback. So thanks for joining us in the first session of our 2-week NACE Connect celebration. Thanks, everyone.